Why do historians speculate that a German victory in World War II would reshape our world forever? The implications of such a victory are vast and complex, touching every aspect of life as we know it. From political landscapes to cultural norms, the ripple effects of a Nazi-dominated world would be profound and far-reaching. Historians often engage in these speculative exercises to understand the fragility of our current world order and to appreciate the monumental efforts that went into defeating such a regime. By examining this alternate history, we can gain insights into the values and decisions that have shaped our present and perhaps learn lessons to guide our future. Let's dive into this chilling possibility. Imagine a world where the Axis powers led by Nazi Germany emerged victorious. The very fabric of our societies would be altered, and the course of history would take a dark and twisted path. The victory of the Nazis would not just be a military triumph, but a complete overhaul of the global order. The ideologies of hate and supremacy that fueled their war machine would become the guiding principles of governance and social organization. This alternate reality is not just a historical curiosity, but a stark reminder of the dangers of unchecked power and the importance of vigilance in preserving democratic values. First, Europe would be unrecognizable. The continent, as we know it, would be a patchwork of territories either directly controlled by the Nazis or governed by puppet regimes loyal to Berlin. The rich tapestry of cultures and nations that make up Europe would be replaced by a monolithic and oppressive regime. The diversity that has been the hallmark of European civilization would be systematically eradicated in favor of a homogenized Aryan ideal. Cities that were once centers of art, science, and philosophy would be reduced to mere outposts of Nazi ideology, their histories rewritten to fit the narrative of the victors. Nazi Germany's new order would dominate the continent, with countries like France and Poland either annexed or controlled by puppet governments. The political landscape of Europe would be drastically altered, with traditional power structures dismantled and replaced by Nazi loyalists. The concept of national sovereignty would be rendered meaningless as the Nazi regime imposed its will on the subjugated populations. The once vibrant and independent nations of Europe would be reduced to mere administrative regions within the greater Nazi empire, their cultures and identities systematically erased. The Holocaust might have intensified, tragically reshaping Europe's demographics through widespread genocide and forced relocations. The systematic extermination of Jews, Romani people, disabled individuals, and other groups deemed undesirable by the Nazi regime would continue unabated. The scale of the atrocities would be unimaginable, with entire communities wiped out and their histories erased. The demographic landscape of Europe would be forever altered, with the rich cultural diversity that once defined the continent replaced by a chilling uniformity. The human cost of this genocide would be staggering, with millions more lives lost and countless others scarred by the horrors of the Nazi regime. In global politics, conflict wouldn't have ended with the Soviet Union's defeat. The Nazi regime's ambitions extended far beyond the borders of Europe, and their victory would have set the stage for further expansion and conquest. The ideological battle between fascism and communism would have continued, with the Nazis seeking to eradicate any remaining opposition to their rule. The world would be plunged into a state of perpetual conflict, with new fronts opening up in Asia, Africa, and the Americas. The balance of power would be constantly shifting, with alliances forming and dissolving as nations struggled to navigate the treacherous waters of a Nazi-dominated world. Hitler's quest for Lebensraum would spark decades of guerrilla warfare and unrest. The concept of Lebensraum, or living space, was central to Nazi ideology, and their victory would have seen the implementation of this policy on a massive scale. Entire populations would be displaced to make way for German settlers, leading to widespread resistance and rebellion. Guerrilla fighters would take to the forests and mountains, waging a relentless war against the occupiers. The landscape of Europe would be scarred by the constant conflict, with towns and villages caught in the crossfire. The human toll would be immense, with countless lives lost and communities torn apart by the violence. The US might have adopted a more isolated stance, potentially leading to a Cold War, or even new conflicts with a victorious Germany. The American public, weary of war and wary of foreign entanglements, might have turned inward, focusing on domestic issues and avoiding involvement in the global struggle. This isolationist stance would have significant implications for the balance of power, with the US ceding its role as a global leader. The absence of American influence would create a power vacuum, with other nations vying for dominance. The Cold War, as we know it, might have taken on a very different character, with the US and Nazi Germany locked in a tense and uneasy standoff. If the Nazis had succeeded in invading, the UK could have faced occupation or forced collaboration, speeding up the collapse of the British Empire. The British Isles, long a bastion of resistance against Nazi aggression, would have been brought to heel, their proud history of defiance reduced to a footnote in the annals of Nazi conquest. The British Empire, already weakened by the strains of war, would have crumbled under the weight of occupation, its vast territories falling into the hands of the Axis powers. The cultural and political influence of Britain would be greatly diminished, with the once mighty empire reduced to a mere shadow of its former self. Technologically, Germany's advances in military and space tech could have progressed faster, but at a grave ethical cost. The Nazi regime's focus on scientific and technological innovation would have driven rapid advancements in fields such as rocketry, aviation, and nuclear research. However, these advancements would come at a terrible price, with human experimentation and unethical practices becoming the norm. The pursuit of knowledge would be tainted by the regime's twisted ideology, with scientific progress used to further the goals of oppression and domination. The ethical boundaries that guide modern research would be disregarded, leading to a dark and dangerous era of technological development. Unethical experiments, especially in eugenics and human experimentation, might have spread globally. The Nazi regime's obsession with racial purity and genetic superiority would drive a global movement towards eugenics and human experimentation. Scientists and doctors, emboldened by the regime's support, would conduct horrific experiments on unwilling subjects seeking to unlock the secrets of human genetics. The ethical standards that protect human rights and dignity would be eroded, with the pursuit of scientific knowledge taking precedence over the well-being of individuals. The legacy of these experiments would be a world scarred by the horrors of unchecked scientific ambition. Culturally, the suppression of non-Aryan arts and ideas would have stifled diversity and freedom of expression. The rich cultural heritage of Europe, with its diverse traditions and artistic expressions, would be systematically dismantled by the Nazi regime. Books, artworks, and music that did not conform to the Aryan ideal would be banned or destroyed, their creators persecuted or silenced. The vibrant cultural landscape that has defined human civilization would be reduced to a monochrome reflection of Nazi ideology. The loss of cultural diversity would be a profound tragedy, with entire artistic movements and traditions erased from history. Fascist ideologies could have gained a stronghold worldwide. The victory of the Nazis would embolden fascist movements around the globe, leading to the rise of authoritarian regimes in many countries. The principles of fascism, with its emphasis on nationalism, militarism, and racial purity, would become the dominant political ideology. Democracies would struggle to survive in this hostile environment, with many succumbing to the allure of strongman rule. The global political landscape would be marked by the rise of totalitarian states, each seeking to emulate the success of the Nazi regime. The ideals of freedom, equality, and human rights would be under constant threat, with the world teetering on the brink of a new dark age. Resistance movements would persist, fighting against Nazi oppression, but the global economy would be tightly controlled and resources exploited to sustain the Nazi regime. The spirit of resistance, though battered and bruised, would not be extinguished. Across the world, brave individuals and groups would continue to fight against the oppressive regime, seeking to reclaim their freedom and dignity. However, the economic landscape would be dominated by the Nazis, with resources and wealth concentrated in the hands of the few. The global economy would be geared towards sustaining the war machine, with little regard for the well-being of ordinary people. The exploitation of resources and labor would be rampant, leading to widespread poverty and suffering. A world dominated by Nazi Germany would be one of extreme authoritarianism and suppressed freedoms, marked by ongoing conflict and resistance. The principles of democracy and human rights would be trampled underfoot, with the Nazi regime imposing its will through fear and violence. Public executions, propaganda, and the constant presence of soldiers would create an atmosphere of terror and oppression. The freedoms that we take for granted today, such as freedom of speech, assembly, and religion, would be severely restricted or outright banned. The world would be a bleak and oppressive place, with the shadow of the Nazi regime looming large over every aspect of life. The cultural, scientific, and political advances of the post-war era might have looked very different, if they happened at all. The post-war period, marked by rapid advancements in technology, culture, and politics, would be drastically altered in a world dominated by the Nazis. The innovations that have defined the modern era, from the space race to the civil rights movement, might never have occurred. The oppressive regime would stifle creativity and progress. With scientific research and cultural expression tightly controlled, the world would be a poorer place, deprived of the rich tapestry of human achievement that has defined the post-war era. Scary to think about, isn't it? The thought of a world dominated by the Nazis is a chilling reminder of the fragility of our current world order. It serves as a stark warning of the dangers of unchecked power and the importance of vigilance in preserving the values of democracy and human rights. By examining this alternate history, we can gain a deeper appreciation for the sacrifices made by those who fought against tyranny and a renewed commitment to ensuring that such a dark chapter in history is never repeated. The lessons of the past are clear. The fight for freedom and justice is never over, and we must remain ever vigilant in the face of oppression.